How could a child born from pure divine energy become the only hope to defeat a powerful demon? Why do ancient Hindu traditions describe the birth of Murugan as one of the most unusual births in mythology? And what can this ancient story really teach us today about destiny, courage, and the power of human effort? Across South Asia, especially in places like Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka, millions of people respect Murugan as a symbol of wisdom, bravery, and discipline. But the story of how this divine warrior came into the world is more than a myth about gods and demons. It is a story about struggle, patience, and the search for balance when the world faces a serious problem. The main details of this story appear in ancient Hindu scriptures such as the Skanda Purana and the Shiva Purana. Scholars and teachers often explain that different regions tell the story with small differences, but the core message remains very similar. According to these traditions, a powerful demon named Tarakasura became so strong that even the gods struggled to stop him. Ancient texts say that he had received a special boon from Brahma, which made him almost impossible to defeat. The prophecy said that only the son of Shiva could end his rule. But at that time, Shiva lived in deep meditation. After the loss of Sati, and the birth of such a child seemed impossible. This is where the story becomes both mysterious and meaningful. The journey that led to the birth of Murugan involves patience, devotion, and the combined effort of many divine forces, including Parvati, who plays a very important role in awakening hope again. In this video, we will explore how this remarkable birth took place, what the ancient scriptures say about it, and why the story still inspires many people today. If you want to understand the deeper meaning behind the rise of this divine warrior and the lessons about destiny and effort hidden inside the story, watch this video until the end. And if you enjoy learning about meaningful stories like this, remember to like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more thoughtful explorations of history, mythology, and wisdom. In many ancient Hindu stories, the world does not always remain peaceful. There are times when balance is lost, and powerful forces create fear among people and even among the gods. One such story begins with a demon king named Tarakasura. According to traditional Hindu texts like the Skanda Purana and the Shiva Purana, Tarakasura was not born powerful. Like many characters in Hindu mythology, he first performed intense spiritual practices for many years. These practices were meant to gain the attention of Brahma, who is often described in the scriptures as the giver of special boons. The story explains that Brahma eventually appeared before Tarakasura and allowed him to ask for a blessing. Tarakasura requested a protection that would make him almost impossible to defeat. According to the myth, the boon declared that only the future son of Shiva could destroy him. At that moment, this request seemed harmless, but over time, the result became dangerous. Tarakasura grew stronger and began to challenge the balance of the world. Stories describe how he defeated many divine armies and created fear among the gods and people. The problem was that Shiva was not living a normal life at that time. According to Hindu mythology, Shiva had withdrawn from the world after the tragic death of Sati. Many stories explain that he entered deep meditation in the mountains and avoided all worldly matters. Because of this, the birth of a son who could defeat Tarakasura seemed very unlikely. As a result, the gods began to worry. Figures such as Indra and Vishnu are described in these traditions as discussing how the world could return to balance. At this point, the story introduces an important idea about destiny. The prophecy suggested that a solution already existed, but the path toward that solution was not simple or immediate. Many teachers who explain these myths say this reflects a deeper message. In real life, problems often appear before the solution becomes clear. A society may face injustice, a family may face hardship, or a person may face a difficult personal struggle. The myth does not claim to describe historical events, but it shows how ancient storytellers tried to explain an important truth. Even when a solution is part of destiny, patience and effort are still needed before that solution appears. After the rise of Tarakasura, the gods understood that the problem could not be solved by force alone. The prophecy said that only the future son of Shiva could defeat the demon. But Shiva was still living in deep meditation and remained distant from worldly life. This is where another important figure in Hindu tradition enters the story: Parvati. Many Hindu texts explain that Parvati is believed to be the rebirth of Sati, Shiva's first wife. The story of Sati's earlier life and her tragic death is described in scriptures such as the Shiva Purana, and later traditions connect that story to Parvati's role in restoring balance to the world. According to these traditions, Parvati was born as the daughter of the mountain king Himavan and his queen Mena. From a young age, she is described as having a deep spiritual connection with Shiva. Many versions of the story say that she chose a life of discipline and spiritual practice in order to gain Shiva's attention and respect. In Hindu teachings, this type of long and focused spiritual effort is often called tapasya, which means deep meditation and self-discipline. Ancient stories describe how Parvati lived a very simple life during this time, sometimes meditating in forests or mountains, showing patience and dedication even when the result was uncertain. Different scriptures explain this period with slightly different details, which scholars often note when studying Hindu mythology. However, the central idea remains consistent. Parvati's determination was strong enough to move the story forward. Over time, Shiva began to notice her dedication and sincerity. Eventually, according to these traditions, Shiva accepted Parvati as his partner. Their union was not only a personal event between two divine figures. In the story, it also became an important step toward restoring balance in the universe. Many teachers and writers who explain this myth today point out a meaningful lesson in this part of the story. While the myth itself belongs to religious tradition and symbolic storytelling, the idea behind it is easy to understand in everyday life. Big changes rarely happen quickly. Whether someone is building a career, learning a difficult skill, or overcoming a personal struggle, progress often requires patience and steady effort. Parvati's story is often remembered as a symbol of commitment and perseverance, showing how determination can help move even the most difficult situations toward a solution. After the union of Shiva and Parvati, the story moves toward the event that many traditions describe as the birth of the divine warrior Murugan. Ancient Hindu scriptures explain this moment in a symbolic and unusual way. Instead of a normal birth, several texts describe Shiva releasing powerful sparks of divine energy. These sparks are sometimes called seeds of fire or light in traditional stories. According to the Skanda Purana and the Shiva Purana, the energy was so strong that it could not remain in one place safely. The earth and the gods themselves were unable to hold this intense power for long. Because of this, the story describes the involvement of other divine forces. One important figure is Agni, who is often connected with sacred fire and transformation in Hindu tradition. Some versions of the story say that Agni carried the sparks of Shiva's energy so they could be protected. Another figure, who appears in many versions of the myth, is Ganga, who is widely respected as a sacred river in Hindu culture. In these stories, the cooling and purifying nature of water helped protect the divine sparks. Scholars who study mythology often explain that the presence of both fire and water may symbolically represent balance between powerful natural forces. The story continues by describing how the sparks eventually became 6 separate babies. These children were cared for by 6 celestial mothers, known in Hindu tradition as the Kartikeya. Their name is also connected with a star group in the night sky, known in astronomy as the Pleiades. Some researchers note that ancient cultures often connected myths with visible star patterns, which may explain why the Kartikeya mothers appear in this story. According to the traditional narrative, the 6 babies later came together and formed one divine child with 6 faces. Because of this, Murugan is sometimes called Shanmukha, a Sanskrit name that means the one with 6 faces. In Hindu belief, Murugan is also known by other names such as Kartikeya and Skanda. Different regions prefer different names, especially in South India and Sri Lanka. Religious teachers often explain that the 6 faces of Murugan symbolize awareness, wisdom, and the ability to see in many directions. While these interpretations come from spiritual tradition rather than historical evidence, they help explain why Murugan's birth is remembered as a powerful and meaningful moment in Hindu mythology. As the child Murugan grew, many Hindu traditions describe him as a leader who possessed both courage and wisdom. In stories preserved in texts such as the Skanda Purana and later temple traditions, Murugan is presented not only as a warrior but also as a guide who helps restore balance when the world falls into disorder. The gods were still facing the threat of Tarakasura, whose power had grown after receiving a boon from Brahma. According to the prophecy, only the son of Shiva could defeat him, and Murugan was believed to be that destined child. Because of this, the young deity is often described in mythology as becoming the commander of the divine armies, a role sometimes referred to in Sanskrit traditions as the leader of the gods' forces. A key symbol in Murugan's story is the sacred spear known as the vel. According to many traditions, this weapon was given to him by his mother, Parvati. The vel is more than just a weapon in mythology. Religious teachers and cultural scholars often explain that it represents knowledge and clarity. In symbolic interpretations, the spear is said to cut through ignorance in the same way that wisdom helps people understand truth. These interpretations come from spiritual teachings rather than historical evidence, but they help explain why the vel remains an important symbol in temples and festivals dedicated to Murugan. The story then moves toward the battle between Murugan and Tarakasura. In the mythological narrative, Murugan leads the divine forces and eventually defeats the demon, ending the threat that had troubled the world. This victory restores balance among the gods and brings peace back to the universe. While this battle is part of religious storytelling, rather than recorded history, it has been retold for many centuries in literature, temple art, and devotional songs. Many teachers today suggest that this story also carries a deeper meaning beyond the battle itself. In symbolic explanations, Tarakasura is sometimes understood as representing harmful qualities such as arrogance or uncontrolled power. Murugan's victory is therefore interpreted as the triumph of discipline, knowledge, and courage. This interpretation is an opinion shared by spiritual teachers rather than a literal claim of the ancient texts, but it helps explain why the story continues to inspire many people in regions such as Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka, where Murugan is deeply respected as a symbol of strength, guided by wisdom. The story of Murugan is remembered across many parts of South Asia as a story about courage, patience, and the search for balance when the world faces serious problems. As we have seen, the story begins with the rise of Tarakasura, whose power grew after receiving a boon from Brahma. According to ancient Hindu texts such as the Skanda Purana and the Shiva Purana, the only being who could defeat him would be the son of Shiva. At first, this seemed impossible, because Shiva had withdrawn into deep meditation after the loss of Sati. The story then shows the important role of Parvati, whose patience and spiritual discipline eventually helped bring Shiva back into the world. Their union later leads to the unusual birth of Murugan, a child described in mythology as emerging from divine energy and cared for by celestial forces. It is important to remember that these events belong to religious tradition and mythology, not recorded history. However, the ideas behind the story have been discussed for many centuries by teachers, writers, and scholars. Many people see Murugan's journey as a symbol of how patience, knowledge, and courage can overcome powerful challenges. The sacred spear, known as the Vel, which Murugan receives from Parvati, is often explained in spiritual teachings as a sign of wisdom that removes ignorance. This interpretation is part of religious belief rather than historical fact, but it helps explain why Murugan continues to be respected by many communities today. The story remains especially meaningful in places like Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka, where temples, festivals, and traditional songs keep the memory of Murugan alive. For many listeners, the lasting message of this myth is simple. Even when a problem seems too powerful to defeat, patience, effort, and wisdom can slowly lead the world back toward balance.